Hello, and welcome to this line art tutorial. In this lesson, I will give you some tips as well as share my own thought process and methodology when creating line art for my illustrations. For this lesson, I'm going to start by helping you make sure all of your tools are in the proper setting. Alright, right now I'm working on Photoshop, but this is something that applies to almost any drawing software you'll find, for digital art at least. Alright, so when we're going to start doing line art, the first thing I want to make sure is that you're using a brush with the proper settings. The way brushes work in Photoshop and most other software is by replicating one image multiple times along the direction or movement you do with your own stylus. Most of the times, the shapes are so close together that they seem to form a line. This is the way this works. Let me show you here. So, for example, here you can see the small preview. And if I make the spacing too large, you can actually see the individual shapes. Usually Photoshop comes with the normal setting of 20% spacing, which is sadly not really the best for line art. I usually prefer to go somewhere between 9 and 11%. The reason for this is that when working on large illustrations, you start to see that the lines you make can have small artifacts or deformations. For example, here, if I zoom in to this 20% spacing line, you're going to start seeing these small little bumps here. All of this. These are basically just like the tops and bottoms of the circles that compose the line that we're making. And the larger the brush stroke you need to do, the more noticeable these small artifacts will be. For example, if I make this brush really, really large, you can see them even more clearly now, right? So what I recommend is keeping the spacing down to something between 9 and 11%. I don't recommend going too low because if you do, it starts to get too heavy for the computer. With 9%, you shouldn't have this issue anymore. And as you can see from the lines I have here, the one with the 9 and 20%, even if we close up, you can still see that the 9% line looks pretty much straight. So that's the first thing. The second one is the angle in which you draw your own lines and something called line confidence. The way our arm works when we're drawing, it goes basically from our shoulder, and it works like a compass, right? So we can make this movement in a very natural way. So doing lines that follow that particular movement will be easier for us and will strain our muscles less than, say, doing a line that goes like this. So one, it will look more natural in the sense that there will be less wobbling since we can use our own arm as a compass. And second, it will tire our muscles a bit less. How you can use this to your advantage? Well, basically, most of the software for drawing digitally already comes in with the ability to rotate your canvas. So I'd suggest rotating the canvas for that particular illustration so that most of the lines you do can be done in this angle. Now, other than angle, another big part of this is something else I already mentioned, line confidence. What's this? Basically, when you're going to do line art, don't do the lines in a really slow manner. Like, for example, if you are doing an arm, don't go slowly like this. Try to be fast and precise with your movements. Why is this? When you go too slow, you'll start seeing some wobbling in your lines. Like it's clearly visible on this top one here. The slower you go, the more wobbling there will be. So I recommend doing faster movements, and as the name says, basically being a bit more confident with them. This will help give you like crisper lines and obviously a better looking line art since all the lines will look straighter and less wobbly, like the one over here. There are some tools that can actually help you with this. There is an extension for Photoshop called LazyLesumi, and other programs like Clip Studio Paint, Paint Tool SAI, and Medibank Paint Pro that automatically come with line correction tool already on them. Like for example, here I have Medibank Paint Pro. You can see when I do a line, even if I do it slowly, you can see the wobbling, right? If I turn on line correction, let's say to 11, this will help make all the lines I make a bit more rounded, it helps reduce the noise from wobbling. So if you have access to any of these tools, it can be a really great help when doing line art. The only drawback of using these kind of tools is that it creates a small lag with the stylus movement when you're doing the line art. For example, if I pump up this to the maximum and move really quickly, the line will seem to lag behind the cursor. But other than that, it's a really great tool. It's great for especially people that are just beginning on line art. So if you're able to do it, I'd say give it a try. Let's return here. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is line weight, and this is a really important subject here. Line weight basically is the hierarchy we give to the lines within our illustration. And doing this will help us direct the eyes of the viewer within our illustration, help certain areas pop up more, other areas go further into the background. Here I have these two TSE heads, one right next to each other. The one on the left has no line weight, no line hierarchy at all, whilst the ones on the right do have some line weight applied to them. And you can instantly see that it looks more interesting. Now, how exactly to know where to apply line weight and how to know which lines to make a bit thicker than the rest? There's multiple things. First, details and overlaps. Usually, I try to make bigger shapes like the outline a lot thicker, like for example, this here, than all the details that will be within the drawing itself, like for example, these small details on this metallic bowl. Also, when there are small areas that protrude or pop up from the main shape, I can also do a bit thicker lines in that area, which will help them look more 3D, so to speak. As I mentioned, all of this has to do with the hierarchy. So basically, the smaller the detail, the less important it is. I'll go for a thinner line. The more important and bigger the shape is, I'll go with this one. Another thing that can help you decide how thick to make a line is lighting. Making a line thinner, closer to your light source, will already help you give a feeling of shading to the object. Like for example, this sphere here, if my lighting is coming from this side, I'll make this light a bit thinner than this one. And that will automatically already give this a bit more form and shape, 3D feel as well, since it looks like it's been shaded. Another important thing is distance. The closer our object comes to the viewer or camera, or however you want to think of it, the thicker the lines will be. This also helps you give like a bit more depth to your paintings. So as you can see, for example, since this small pole is further behind than this one, even if it's the same object, I'm going to use a thinner line to help give this depth to it. And finally, there's occlusion. This will be easier once I show you the final example, but basically areas where the shadows pull within the shapes of a painting or a drawing, there you can do a small, for example here, where two lines meet, you can thicken that connection a bit more to give this impression of occlusion shadows. For example, you can see it here. Okay, I'm going to open this example I have here to show you a bit of this. Okay, so basically, some of the things you can notice here are the occlusion shadows. You can notice it here where the horn meets the head. This small area that helps it look like a shadow. Here in the chin. You can also see how details are done with much thinner lines than the outline and other areas. And a few of the other things I already talked about. One last thing I'd like to add in regards to lines itself is that you don't only have to use lines. Sometimes adding dots or small cross-hatchings in some areas can help you mark certain details without actually separating it from the whole drawing. Like for example here, I wanted to mark this muscle a bit without completely making it into a new shape or a new line, so it doesn't become so obstructive. So what I did was add small dots instead of a full line. I'd really recommend playing around with this. One of the things I really like about line art is that it's really flexible. There are so many styles out there. I really recommend you go check many of the artists that do this. There are some that do really impressive stuff. I'll send you some links in the description of this video. So with line art, since there are so many things you can do, you can even add shadows in this area. For example, like this. I mean, this is taking it to a bit of an extreme, but still you can add shadows, lights, details, textures. You can do a lot of things with line art, so I really recommend you experiment a lot with it. I usually like to add a bit of the reflected light into it as well in some areas to help them like pop up or not get lost within the shadows whenever I do them. Like for example here with the cheek and the chin, if I don't put in these small reflected light areas, it kind of gets lost within the shadows. Alright, so last thing I want to talk about line art is coloring line art. Most of the times you'll notice most of my drawings and illustrations don't have line art like in just plain black color as you can see here. What I usually do is add a bit of color to a line art. This helps make the painting a bit more soft looking. The contrast becomes more subtle, so the whole thing doesn't look as contrasty as just using black for the line art. The way I do this is basically start with my normal line art, let's say this one in black colors. Then I use this small button here that what lets me is block the pixels in this area, so whatever I paint over this will not go over the pixels in the line art, so I will only be painting over the line art. And then just use the bucket tool to fill it with one of the colors I want. And using the hue and saturation tool, I can just change the colors of this line art and see what works best. Here I usually either use the colors of the shadow, for example this purple or a blue, or the same colors as the character just to make it a bit less contrasting against the drawing. Again, I really recommend you experiment a bit with this till you get the results you want. And well, this is all for this lesson. I hope this is useful to you. I'll add a few links in the description so you can check out other artists and styles that you can check. Have a great day and see you next time.